Your hosts have earned a reputation as fierce and effective advocates inside and outside of the courtroom. Both partners are experienced trial attorneys who have been board certified in family law by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization.
All right. Well, welcome to this week's podcast. We have with us today Heather Hudson, who is a realtor extraordinaire, and she's going to be talking to us about some house issues and things that come up with the marital residence or a second home, and things how that works from her perspective as a realtor. So, Heather, give us your name and tell us about yourself.
Oh my goodness, Jake. So, yes, Heather Hudson. I am a real estate broker at Compass. I have a team of agents, and now my team of assistants is getting almost as big as my team of agents because we've got so much going on. But I'm with the Austin Residential Group. I'm the principal broker for that group at Compass. I'm a native Austinite. I just turned 50, so I am an official unicorn. Born and raised here, went to UT for undergrad, graduated in business economics from UT, and then I did my graduate work in Houston at the University of Houston School of Architecture. Came back, worked with my family business for quite some time, trying to help out after some people got sick, and ended up like being in charge of marketing and advertising, and self-taught myself all kinds of things with putting, design and everything. And I've always had a love for real estate. I mean, my parents, when I was growing up, they would not be able to find me. We were in a newer neighborhood back then in the 80s, and they'd drive around trying to find me, and I'd be like walking around houses that were under construction, just checking them out. So I've had this love, forever, and traveling Europe really spurred the love of architecture, and that's why I ended up kind of going that route. But life and changes in my family brought me back to the family business, and then post divorce, that's why we're here, right? I found
Yeah.
myself needing to secure employment that I could rely on and not rely on, um, any kind of child support or whatever that might be. And that's how I got into it. I've been divorced for 10 and a half years, and I have been a real estate agent for I guess we're going on 8.5 years now. A real estate broker about 4. So it's a little bit
Well,
about me.
how's business these days with the Austin market?
Can you see the bags under my eyes?
Yeah.
I was up till 2 last night trying to make sure I had time to do all my business before this podcast. Business is great. I can talk about the state of the market and a little bit about my professional opinion on what we've seen. I know that the press, like anything, kind of exacerbates some of the stuff and it's very excitable, and we definitely had a hugely excitable spring. There's no question there. Um, and things are leveling out. People go, oh, we're in a slump now, or you missed the market. That's not it at all. I remember saying, let's see, if March, April, May is when there was no stop. Like every time we throw a dart and put a price on a house, it would sell for over that. And I was like, there's no way I'm going to be selling a $700,000 Lost Creek home. 2 years ago it would have been 700,000 for 2 million. Like it's got to stop. At some point, it's got to stop. And that's what we saw kind of there at the end of the spring, about May. And I'm fortunate enough to be heavy on listings. I do a lot in Westlake, Central, and not as much Central, but anyways, I have a lot of listings, and having the listings, you can really see the buyers' reactions and how they're responding to the market. So, in March, going from a house I listed at 115, and I have to say that I told my clients in January we were going to list for 950, and they were like, "Oh, we don't want to be greedy. We don't want to be greedy." Come March, I listed at 115. We had 14 offers and closed at $1,420,000. I mean, just like blown away. So that was March in Westlake. And then in May, what what happened is we started having closings. So all of the closings from that spike, January, February, March, April, all those contracts started closing. And when those start closing, then us agents, we're no longer throwing a dart. We actually have real numbers that we can base the list price on. So now in May, a house that probably back in March I would have also listed at 115. I'm like, no, that's going to go for far more. So I listed at 135. Instead of getting 14 offers and substantially over ask, I got 4 full price offers. I was like, whoa, I've never, I mean, in 6 months, I had not done a listing and received actually at the list price. Everything's always been above. So I was able to see it live, like, because I was bringing new listings to the market almost weekly. And it was real interesting. But what I attribute it to is several factors, and it's not just real estate. One, by May, a lot of people, the buyers were beat up. I mean, I hear stories from, buyers agents. They've made 20 offers and they were denied, they didn't win any of them, and they're just exhausted. Then it's also the end of the school year, and we've got vaccines and travel is opening up, and people are like, we're just taking a break from this craziness. So you've got a few people that are just withdrawing. Then also, I kind of call it the California mentality, and I learned this from my own personal buyers that were from California. Is that I describe it as like an eBay way of listing homes in California. The list price is very rarely the actual expected sales price. So in California, when you see something go on the market, you're expecting to pay over that, right? So you would never make an offer. You know that if you made an offer at the list price, it's not yours. So when our market pricing caught up with all that craziness of the spring, they're looking at, this is exactly what somebody told me. 135 for that house, that's not a 1.5 house. And I'm like, I know, that's why I priced it at 135. Like you could just see it. It's like mind boggling. So that's kind of, in a nutshell, what I think vaccine, travel opening up, exhaustion and fatigue, and just summer and the heat, Austin has a way of driving people out of the state. Out of the city, just one time a year is when it gets 100 degrees here.
Oh, our next door neighbors bought their house, and they just moved in. They're from Maryland, right? And they did the thing that particularly during COVID, where they never saw the house, right? I was talking to them. We're friends with them now, but they just had their listing agent give them a little video tour, offered above list, bought it, and then didn't move in for like another 4 months. Of course, then they moved in July, right? So they're from Maryland. Before then, they lived in Chicago, I think, and then they moved in. First couple of days are 110 degrees, and we're just out there loving it, right? It's like, welcome to Texas. Come on down. But they've I think they're enjoying it. But so as far as I'm just curious, like the buyers that you're seeing. I mean, what you don't have to put a percentage on it, but the stereotype is it's you list the house and it's 5 people from California make an offer without even seeing it. I mean, are you seeing the influx? Because you read all the news stories about folks moving here to particularly to Austin, but all over the state of Texas, and
Right.
a lot of people from California moving here. Are you seeing that in your?
Oh, absolutely. I think it also depends. It first depends on the property and the location. So people from out of town, they need move-in ready. So you're going to see a lot more competition, a lot more out of town buyers on the move-in ready homes, the ones that need some attention, which is a large portion of Austin. That's not new construction. That's a little bit challenging. I mean, we as an Austinite, I know it's not a good time to remodel. Costs are up, construction times are delayed, everything. You can't get a pool, for 12 months here, and the prices have shot up because there's so much demand now. So if we're scared of that, you can imagine if you're moving from New York, California, Chicago, Seattle, Florida. Those are the main places where we're seeing a lot of buyers. So move-in ready has a premium, and those are the ones that you're going to see more of the out-of-town buyers, in my opinion. Now it just fluctuates, certain neighborhoods, people within the neighborhood, like I live in Lost Creek, and we have a lot of, you know, horizontal, vertical, I don't know, all over kind of movement around the neighborhood. A lot of people are like lifers. They just move from one house to the other. So you will get some locals in some of the pockets. But definitely still a huge influx. I've sold, if you can believe it, let's see, I've sold three that I can think of right off the top of my head. Right when the governor shut the state down, I had a listing come online, and the buyer ended up being from Boston. They bought, I say sight unseen, but they did FaceTime with their client and or with their agent. And then I represented buyers who found me, I think, on the internet or something. I can't even remember how they found me. And they were moving from New York, and she had a newborn, and he couldn't come down to see because then he'd have to quarantine for 14 days. And he was like, I have to be able to help my wife with the newborn child. So they bought. I represented them as buyers in, I'm trying to think, $1.75 million home. That last one was around $1 million, the first one. And then I had some buyers from Hong Kong. We have a lot of Hong Kong buyers. They're usually American, but yeah, I forgot about that. That was May, June. We started seeing a lot, like several, and that's 2 million or more price point. And they did the same thing, bought virtually. Now, when I do, that stresses me out as a buyer's agent. Like, I mean, as a listing agent, I'm all about disclosure. Y'all like that as attorneys, right? I'm all about disclosure. I get everything, like my master electrician comes in and inspects the home, and if my seller can't afford to fix it, a lot of times I'll pick up the bill and they'll just reimburse me at closing. But if they can't afford it, we'll just go ahead and disclose that, right? Much rather, as a buyer, I'd much rather have a master electrician, a master plumber, a roofer. We use Wilson Roofing, known to have the best reputation in Austin. My assistant's sitting here. Who's the other electrician, plumber, AC, air conditioning? So I have what I call a buyer's peace of mind guide, and that has all of those inspections in there that makes you feel a little bit more comfortable. Yeah. So anyway, I'm all about disclosure. So when I'm representing a buyer in, New York that's got a crying baby in the background, I'm not even kidding y'all. I was on my hands and knees. Like, I want you to see, this home was built in 96. This is what the
Right.
baseboard looks like. Like, I know there's probably a filter on my phone. So please, I was creaking around. I remember there was like a creak in the carpet upstairs, because the subfloor wasn't screwed down properly, or it just, with age. And I'm like jumping around, and
Yeah.
they're like, "You're the best realtor ever." And I'm like, "Well, you're stressing me out here. This is an expensive purchase to be." I walked every square inch of that lot, and it was like an acre. But
You think it's going to stay like that? I mean, even when things open back up and everything like that, you think we'll still see people, or
well,
are people going to start flying down for seeing their houses?
I think this whole COVID situation has changed all of us and our day to day. Look at us now having a meeting together versus setting up something in a meeting room. I think that when hopefully we get through this, people will, hey, I'm going to fly down, and we're looking, more. But I also believe that we've got so many new ways. We're all getting more adjusted, especially as realtors. We now know how to sell a home virtually. So I think they'll be more comfortable. People will be more comfortable with buying virtually.
With the people moving to, I was going to say, I mean, Brian and I see it in our profession too, right? More and more. And Brian, I think you see it, um, all over the state. We see it all over the state, but particularly Austin. As people come in, they've moved. They decided to move to Texas. They decided to move to Austin, which I think it's been listed as one of the best places to live and one of the fastest growing. But they're married. They've got kids. They've spent their whole life in California. They spent their whole life in New York, and they moved to Texas. And the move's stressful. They moved because there's a newborn or something like that. That's stressful. And then you have folks going through a divorce, pretty quickly after moving, and then there's a lot of times jurisdictional issues depending on how long they've been here, and somebody may want to go back. And I don't know about you, Brian, but I'm seeing more and more of those kind of move cases of we moved to Texas, but now we're getting divorced and somebody wants to go back. Are you seeing that?
Yeah, exactly, and that can be difficult too. We've got one right now where they hadn't sold their house in Southern California, and then they bought one here. Um, you know, that's frequently the situation, and now we've got two. They're in two places with two houses, and one or both of those need to be sold, and somebody wants to go back to New York or wherever after they're here, and so these things, yeah, often come up in what we see.
Yeah, I've had one where I think there was a dispute about whether or not they were moving to Texas or if they were just temporarily going to be in Texas. And then, Heather, you weren't the realtor on it, but the poor realtor got roped in, subpoenaed, what everybody's saying, what, here's the documents they signed that said primary residence and, all that stuff. So, well, talk to me about, because I know you've done it. I mean, is it different if you're listing a house and the folks are going through a divorce? Is it a different approach for you? Is it just like any other deal? You just have to coordinate with,
Right.
maybe not as much coordination on the other side from the sellers.
Yeah, I've done several divorce situations, and what the main difference for me is how I communicate. I never want one to get information that the other hasn't gotten, or one gets it first and uses that, like, oh, I heard about this. Maybe whoever's living in the home that's selling is obviously going to know more about the showings, but I moved to an pretty much all email, all group text state so that I can make sure that everything is documented. I know that y'all need that probably as much as I do. Sorry for my y'all. That's me. Um, but that would probably be one of the biggest things. And then just, making sure that they are taking care of the legal matters on their end. So when this does sell, it can sell. Like they understand, and that's really me sending them back to their divorce attorney and just saying, you need to make sure that you're in a place where you can sell this. And if we sold it in 30 days or 2 weeks, you get cash buyers that'll pay, cash in 2 weeks and close. Would you even be able to sell? Are you at a place where you can do that and it makes sense, right? I think you and I discussed a little bit about a lender friend of mine, Ann Jones at Cornerstone, and there's a lot of strategy, and it's not strategic in a bad way. It's just you need to know a few things going into it. With when you have one person making a payment and the other person is trying to buy a house, you
Right.
don't want that mortgage that you're on the deed as well to count against you as a debt that you're paying. But that's Anne's
Yeah,
answer
talk to me
on
about
my
purchasing. I mean, have you, because we talked about selling, then purchasing the divorce, kind of what issues come up if you're, they're moving out of the, say they list the marital home in the middle of the divorce and they don't want to rent, they want to go buy something. But
Yeah,
the divorce isn't set. I mean, I have divorces that last 2 or 3 years. You can't necessarily just sit there and stay in an apartment and so I have people that purchase real estate while the divorce is pending. You typically have to have court permission because most counties are going to have a standing order that says you can't purchase something like that without court approval, or there's going to be a temporary injunction that says the same. But I do have
right.
people where both sides agree. We can let folks buy houses while the divorce is pending. But what issues does that present for y'all representing the buyer in that
Right.
situation?
Well, I can speak from my personal experience with a 5.5 year divorce. It was really probably a 2 year divorce and then 2.5 years, 3 years of appellate uh, litigation. But I wasn't working for the last 8 years in my divorce. I mean, in my marriage. And so when it came time to buy a home, and we hadn't really divided up the assets, um, or maybe the awarding hasn't happened. I don't remember exactly. It's been a while, but I ultimately had to go to a private bank, a local bank that did a portfolio loan, and I kind of just laid everything out on the table and said, at a minimum, I'm going to get, the marital home. We're expecting that, kind of already been, and they really had to take a chance on me. And this is a while back, this is 2011, so 2012. So one thing I did learn from a lender, but I don't know how much things have changed, is if I had a savings account or investments, and every month I had withdrawn the same amount, whether that was $1,000 or $5,000 every month for 24 months, I was withdrawing that and depositing it, and the investment was still, at least staying stable, that they could have included that as income. So that's something that I thought was interesting. And I think that, again, talking to a lender, somebody like Ann who's been in it forever, would be a advantage, on the front end, even when, somebody hasn't filed, because once you file, as you know, a lot of things come to a screeching halt, and you don't have the opportunity to do different things. And if, both parties agree, maybe you can get a little bit creative to make sure that one person doesn't find themselves unable to qualify when,
Right.
could have figured something
Well, in
else
our
out.
world, you see sometimes the parties are, even if they're getting a divorce, not getting along, they're motivated to cooperate on this issue because they may all want their child, for example, going to a particular school district, and
Right.
it's not going to happen unless we can find a house in that area. And maybe the parents are going to be able to agree on they'll agree to a 50-50 schedule if we can all live in the same area, or
Right.
they'll agree a possession schedule that makes sense, but only makes sense if we're all in this area. But if mom or dad can't find a house in this area, then she has to move with her family, a county away or 2 counties away, and then we have a big fight, right?
Right.
But if we're able to sort of work together and collaborate, kind of align our interests, we really are sort of pushing everybody to cooperate and try to get that known deal, because it's a big unknown. If people don't
Right.
know where they're going to live at the end of a divorce, that could really come up with that can make it difficult on the divorce lawyers and the parents to make this informed decisions about what our possession schedule is going to look like, what are we going to do as far as exchanges or agreements, where our kid's going to go to school, and so I do encourage people, um, if we're all in this, if we're even if we're not agreeing on the divorce, everything, but try to work to where we can, take these unknowns out so we can make more informed
Right.
decisions. Some of the problems though too is coming up with cash. Particularly in a divorce. I mean, frankly, the divorce attorneys are sucking up a lot of your cash. Or I mean,
No,
you've experienced
not
that
you
too,
guys.
right, Heather? So the divorce attorneys are, if you have somebody valuing the business, then that person's going to be costing money. Or if you've got a forensics custody evaluation going on. I mean, it's just an expensive process. It is,
Right.
right? And we're not a bank, so we're not lending money. So people are dipping into cash. It's just an unexpected life event um, that people just have to. It's an unfortunate reality of divorce. But then at the same time, we have these divorce lawyers or CPAs or psychologists or whatever, with their hand out. Then you got to come up with money for closing. So, in this market, what do you typically see as far
Well,
as what people are requiring for cash to close?
right. One thing I can say is that this market makes both of the owners of a property not willing to really hand it over to the other one, right? Because it's such a hot market. Even though, like, if you rewind time back in March, and somebody was finalizing a home, and they say the value is 115, and in the middle of all the signing and everything, the house two doors down sells for 142 that I just sold, right? That was listed at the same price. All of a sudden, the other person is, wait, that I don't want to do this. So what I see right now, and it may not be the best thing for lenders based on what Ann said, is that you sell the property together, because the purchase price is kind of an unknown. Like, we can give you a good fair market value, but if it's, like I said, if it's move-in ready, if it has a pool, if it's in the right area, has a view, the different things that are attractive to our out-of-town buyers, you could find yourself in a bidding war. And then when that happens, the the price just goes up. Our buyer max budget has increased substantially overall, right? So when we used to have a huge amount of maybe $1 to $1.5 million buyers in the Westlake area and a few in the upper, the whole thing has shifted. So it's very common for us to have a $2 million buyer now. And when I say us, I mean, the agents that are working this area. So now all of a sudden, the $1 to $1.5 million home is super attractive for these $2 million buyers. They're like, oh shoot, I can get that, throw 500,000 in it, and it's like my dream home. And I'm, in Texas, right? So I think that back to what your question was, is I think the big shift or change, what I'm seeing in divorcing today is that it probably makes sense for both parties, because then it's something that's not a tug of war for them to both retain ownership, sell it as a joint asset, and then split the proceeds. Another thing that I want to discuss, you asked about my personal experience, is I was cash poor. I received several assets in our divorce, but I had four properties, four properties with carrying costs, HOA dues, utilities, taxes, insurance. And I'm like, what if I put it on the market? I remember putting one of my condos in Colorado on the market. It was on the market for 3 years. Like it wasn't a sure thing back then, depending on where you are. That can be, great. Oh yeah, you got the house in Barton Creek. Good luck with that. Single mom that hasn't been working for 8 years. So it's really important that whoever gets the home, the value is, if they're going to sell it primarily, the value is not what somebody will pay. Remember, you've got to back out at least 7% closing costs. You've got 3 on each side for your agents, and then 1% minimum in other closing costs. So in my experience, I think I was awarded the home right around where we contracted. However, I had the carrying cost during, it was a little bit longer closing, and then they wanted $8,000 worth of roof repairs. Well, fortunately enough, the roofer said, okay, you can pay me out of the closing proceeds. But I
Right.
mean, where was I going to come up with that? And then, the other 7% in closing. So, that the value was obviously remarkably lower than what was in his column, or,
Right.
our columns, right? So I think that's
Well, I
important.
see it all the time, right? Where divorce attorneys forget, they put the house on their client's side of the spreadsheet, and then there should be a discussion. And I'll say, different courts have different opinions. It depends on how you try the case, but it really is. Yeah, you really should be talking about taking 7% or 8% off when you put it on the spreadsheet, right? Because would I rather have $1 million seen in cash or $1 million house? Well, I'd probably want the $1 million in cash if I'm selling the house, because I'm going to pay 8%. So I'm only going to, so
Yeah,
that's it's something to think about. And frankly, it's something that, depending on what court I'm in, I may pull in a realtor like you have to explain that. I mean, most people
it
know
did,
that, but it's important to have that evidence in front of the trial
right,
court. Particularly if your client's keeping the house.
right. It depends on who, like the situation, because I testified in a divorce hearing not too long ago, where it was known that the husband was going to stay in the house. He was not selling. And so in that, he didn't want to sit there and argue about closing costs and everything. However, he should have, because it would have, dummied down his price. But, I think that's what ends up being a discussion, is if one of the people are going to stay in the home, then they don't want to talk about that. And that kind of rolls us into another area. A lot of, and this is what we did for my divorce, is we had an appraiser, right, come and do the appraisal on the properties, and just trusted that that was the right thing to do. One thing to consider is what happened in my divorce 10 years ago. We hired appraisers to appraise property. He had property in Louisiana, and that's kind of the easiest and the trusted. But now, I wasn't a realtor then. Now I'm on this side, and the appraisers are doing, bless their hearts, they're doing the best they can right now. I mean, they are so slammed. I can tell you, out of the last 10, if I looked at the last 30 transactions, a minimum of 10 of them have been delayed because of appraisal delays, not because of appraisals not coming in at the purchase price, but just because the appraisers are just so slammed. And they're doing what we're doing, staying up long hours because we're trying to make hay while the sun's shining, right? So they're taking on way more than they should, but people are paying astronomical prices for appraisals. But the difference is they aren't doing what we're doing. And realtors, we know true market. We're not basing the value on the fixtures, the way an appraiser approaches it, the construction, or it's just a completely different thing, different animal.
Because like in the divorce context, when we talk about appraisals, if somebody's keeping the house, we're going to have to go get an appraiser on it. You can't just
Right.
pull the tax appraisal on it. And frankly, our courts don't usually accept CMAs. They want a licensed appraiser going out there and giving an opinion on it. And that's all well and good. And if somebody's keeping the house, you have to have that because you got to have a value to put on the spreadsheet. If we're selling the house, doesn't matter. The market's going to tell us what it's worth.
Right.
But if somebody's keeping the house, we have to get the appraisal. But that's harder and harder in this market. I think for my clients, I think are having more difficulty trusting the appraisal because it's just such a influx market. It's stuff that you were talking about is just it's this maybe an appraiser may think it's worth this, but me as the realtor, I know I can sell it for a couple $100,000 above that. And of course,
Right.
as the divorce attorney, last thing I want to do is agree to an appraisal and it goes to the other side. Say, if I've got wife and husband's keeping the house, and then it goes on his side of the spreadsheet at 1.5 million, and then you get the phone call 30 days later, 60 days later, 6 months later saying, hey, I just looked and he's listing it for 2 million. Didn't we put it at 1.5 on his side of the spreadsheet? It's like, yeah, that's what the appraiser said. So, we're it's hard. I mean, it can be done, and it's just people need to be informed. It's just a conversation
Right.
the divorce lawyer has to have with the client. It's like, this is what so and so is saying it's worth, but I'm not a real estate appraiser. I don't know.
Right.
So,
Well,
it's makes us nervous to
what
be
I would
frank.
suggest, so I've had many appraisals where it's, wow, this buyer's really, really set a new bar, and I'm going to work hard. That's actually where I'm headed right after this, is to a listing that's a $2 million listing that is under contract for $2,135,000. So I've got a complete packet that I've put together of off-market sales and sales on MLS that are apples to apples, and all the upgrades, everything for the home. But the difference is these appraisals. I've had an appraiser come out, and I'm like, "How often do you work Barton Creek?" "Well, I'm from Temple." "What?" Like, oh my God, I just gulp. And so we're kind of like helping, here are your comps. So that's crazy. And if it's a divorce, guess what? They're calling the person in the house. They're not calling an agent who their livelihood is make sure this house appraises and this doesn't fall apart, right? So no homeowner is going to put together a big list unless they're just trying to, but they don't have the information that we have. So that's one thing. But with an appraisal, the problem is that they have their certain guidelines, right? After 90 days, they can't consider a comp. Well, in this market where we have such tight inventory and so many things selling off market, you really have to be able to expand that a hair. You have to dig and get some off market listings. And that's what we can do as realtors for you, divorce attorneys. We can find more information, and we can give you a more true value. What they might do is say, oh, well, this was a good one. It sold 2 months ago, but yours has a pool. So I'm going to give you an extra 30,000 adjustment. Yeah, okay, that was 2, 3 years ago. Now that's a $70,000 adjustment because you can't get a pool, and it's $100,000 if you do want to sign up, and it's going to take you 12 months, right? So um, they're about moving levers and doing an adjustment here, an adjustment here, adjustment here. Where us agents, we know our areas. So if you have I do CMAs all over the city for divorce attorneys, but if if the value of a property is highly debatable between a husband and wife that are divorcing, I would say ask them who sends you the most postcards in the mail, who has the most listings in your neighborhood. That is the most in tune person, whether you like them or not. That's the person that is going to be able to tell you the true expected market value of the house. Forget the appraisal that may or may not be from Temple, Texas, or may or may not be working on 2 to 3 hours of sleep. Um, that's the purest way to come to an agreement. And again, just keep the asset and divide it once it sells. And that, I mean, but if it's not
That's
selling,
always the easiest way, right? But the schools, I want to see this house. It's what I want to do, and
right?
I think the key, though, at the end of the day, is it's all about information, right? And it's about you being able to provide information, and then us as the divorce attorney providing the information, giving advice and guidance, and then ultimately it's the client's decision of
Right.
what they want to do. So on the topic of information, to wrap up, can you give us all your contact information the best way? We'll put it in the comments or the description. But can you give us your contact information? What's the best way of people hiring the best realtor in the state of Texas?
I love you, Jake Gilbreth. Um, so I guess it's no secret that I've helped you with a couple of real estate
Yeah,
transactions.
yeah, Heather has. Mhm.
Well, it's good from experience, right? I don't refer anybody that I haven't had experience with, so I really appreciate it, and I'm honored to be able to say that I have helped you. Heather Hudson, I will say, leaving a voicemail is sometimes like going to nowhere with realtor. Any
I'm the same
realtor
way.
voicemails
My
are just
voicemail says, "Don't leave me a voicemail. Send me a text." This is
mine
not the
might say
1990s. Send me a text message, please.
yeah, well, we just get so many telemarketers. Our phone numbers on signs and websites everywhere. So it's my phone number is 512-431-2120. Text me. And email address is I have two, hh@heatherhudson.com or heather.hudson@compass.com because I am at Compass. Those both go to the same place. And, I do CMAs for real estate. For divorce attorneys all the time, free of charge. So, please don't hesitate to reach out to me in the future because it's pretty easy for me. And like I said earlier, if I don't feel really proficient in an area, I will find somebody at Compass. We've got over 750 agents. I'll find
Right.
somebody that's super proficient in an area so that you can get good information for your clients.
Great. Well, Heather, thanks so much for doing this. I hope you enjoyed it, and this is very informative for me, and I hope it's informative for our listeners.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much to both of you guys and have a great holiday season.
You too. All right.
For information about the topics covered in today's episode and more, you can visit our website at waltersgilbreth.com. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of For Better, Worse, or Divorce, where we post new episodes every first and third Wednesday. Do you have a topic you want discussed or a question for our hosts? Email us at podcast@waltersgilbreth.com. Thanks for listening. Until next time.